This week in economics from WBRN radio in Boston and on the Bostonred Network. Old numbers man here. This has been a very interesting week, and incidentally, this is on the 31st of October 2017. We normally do this program over the weekend, and I'm glad we actually waited here to do this in the sense that some new numbers came out today for consumers, very revealing. And of course, we have third quarter GDP numbers. Let me just first give you the GDP numbers, and then we have some commentary and we'll talk about what consumers are doing. But the backdrop here is obviously, if you've heard on the political side, we'll talk more about it on Bostonred. The indictments today handed down at the Federal District Court in Washington, D.C. A number of former aides of D.J. Trump were indicted. Manafort was indicted there, and one aide had already, Papadopoulos, I think, or something of that nature, I don't have it in front of me now, had already pled guilty to the charge. Now, what happens in these kind of instances, having worked as a criminal defense attorney, we know these things, or at least we know about them. It's like a circle. You work from the outer circle, and you are fishing in the pond, so to speak, and you get the little fish first. The Post was commenting on the case of WorldCom, I believe. That was Mr. Evers there, and of course he is in prison for many years. But they got the so-called little fish or guppies first, and you work your way into the inner circle. What you're planning to do there is that you put pressure on many people. And as the indictments start to gain in number and also in momentum, you people that are closer in the circle get more pressure, and also at the same time people tend to look at their individual situations and decide that they're going to work a plea deal out. This is the way it works. But what does this do in the business world or economy? Well, it creates a lot of uncertainty there. This was a week that the Trump administration was going to do several things. They had some announcements to make. One, the appointment of a new Federal Reserve leader of the Federal Reserve, Dr. Janet Yellen. Her term expires in February. The pick, according to the news reports, is Jerome Powell. He is now on the Federal Reserve. He was appointed there by President Barack Obama. He is a Republican. He is sort of the middle-of-the-road person, so you'll have some continuality, which is very important to the business community. But at the same time, you now have chaos in the national government. And also in the Congress, the Republicans are rolling out what will be their quote-unquote tax-cutting plan to much resistance there. The plan to go into a process called reconciliation was about 6 or 7 votes from failure in the House of Representatives. What that basically means is they can do it with just a majority of the votes. With the 50 votes actually, they don't need 51 votes. They don't need to go to 60 votes, so they'd never be able to pass it without any Democratic support at all. But you have major sectors in the economy that are opposed to it. One, the home builders, the National Association of Realtors, because of the mortgage credit. The whole idea behind the so-called new tax scheme is to eliminate certain types of deductions, and it's how you do that. There's another rumor going around about the 401ks. They want to eliminate it. Anytime you're talking about taking 1.5 billion out of the economy, a trillion, out of the economy, you are talking about a big hole. in terms of your tax cuts on a gamble that it will pay off. And what we'll attempt to do in this program by looking at GDP and particularly at where consumers are with their spending habits. Yes, there has been some increase, but at the same time, consumers are going to credit cards and savings. That is not a good sign. And also we'll look at the markets and where petrol energy is at this time. But let me just change screens here and we'll go to the GDP firstly here and get it out of the way, and then this is national income and product accounts, gross domestic product, third quarter advance estimate. Now this is released on the 27th, which was Friday, from the Bureau of Economic Analysis. The real gross domestic product GDP increased an annual rate of 3% in the third quarter, according to the advance estimate released by the Bureau of Economic Analysis. In the second quarter, real GDP increased by 3.1%, a nominally good figure. But the Bureau emphasizes that the third quarter advance estimate released today is based upon source data that are incomplete and subject to further revision by the source agency. Now, this has to be remembered. Now, the more complete release will be on the 29th of November, 2017. The increase in real GDP in the third quarter reflects positive contributions from personal consumption expenditures, that is PCE, private inventory investments, non-residential fixed investments, exports, and federal government spending. These increases are partially offset by negative contributions from residential fixed investment, state and local government spending, imports, which are subtracted in the calculation. The deceleration in real GDP growth in the third quarter primarily reflects deceleration in PCE. In residential fixed investment, exports were partially offset by acceleration in private inventory investment and a downturn in imports. Current dollar GDP increased 5.2%, or $245.5 billion in the third quarter, to a level of 495.5 there. In the second quarter, current GDP increased by 4.1%, or $192.3 billion. The price index for gross domestic purchases increased by 1.8% in Q3, compared with an increase of 0.9% in Q2. The PCE price index increased 1.5%, compared with an increase of 0.3%, that would be in Q2. Excluding food and energy prices, the PCE price index increased 1.3%, compared with an increase of 0.9%. There, personal income. Current dollar personal income increased 113.7 billion in Q3, compared with 119.1 billion in Q2. Deceleration in personal income primarily reflected deceleration in personal dividend income, in rental income, and in wages and salaries that were offset by an acceleration in government social benefits. A similar decrease in personal interest income and acceleration in non-farm proprietors' income, and a smaller decrease in farm proprietors' income. Disposable personal income, something we look at very, very closely, at 73.6 billion, or 2.1% in Q3, compared with 125.1 billion, or 3.6% in Q2. real disposable personal income increased 0.6% compared with an increase of 3.3% in Q2. Personal savings, something to look at very closely. 494.8 billion in Q3 compared with 545.6 billion in Q2. The personal saving rate, personal savings as a percentage of disposable income was 3.4% in Q3 compared with 3.8% in Q2. That's a 4.2% difference there. Information on source data. Anyway, this is a technical note. We won't get into that. But what we shall look at here is gross domestic product. This is just release dates. So we're going over here. Oops. We're leaving here. This is 2017 dates here. Okay. In March, release dates for gross domestic product. In we don't want to go to 2018. Sorry about that. Corporate profits. These are just release dates. We don't want to go there. And let me see if we have anything else here. This is actually it. Just looking at some averages here, that sort of thing. So kind of sum this up, that consumers were dipping into the till, so to speak, to keep their lifestyles moving along. Now, this is the national income and product accounts gross domestic product. This is the third quarter advanced estimate subject to revision. What has not been factored in here was the impact of Harvey, Katrina, etc. That will be in the next release, not in this particular release. So again, we have to look at that and see where we'll be going in terms of the economy, and also the various machinations in Washington. Will they prey on the economy? Will they factor in, I should say, not to prey. That's not the proper word. So we'll look at those, and it's sometimes very difficult to ascertain what is actually going on out there on some of the short-term releases. Now, if you look at the market, that is more of a day-to-day, real-time reaction to certain things out there. Now let's go to our setup here and start with some commentary from various actors on the scene here. Just a minute here. Okay, it's in the wrong place. Okay. So, no. Oh, here we go. Now, this is personal income expenditure. Here in outlays in September 2017. Again, this is released today. More of a picture here. Personal income increased 66.9 billion. That is 4/10 in September, according to the estimate released today by the Bureau of Economic Analysis. Disposable income (DPI) increased 53 billion, or 0.4%. Also, personal consumption expenditure (PCE) increased 136 billion, or 1%. Now we'll run the chart here. Real DPI decreased to less than 0.1% in September, and real PCE increased 0.6% The PCE price index increased 0.4%. That's excluding food and energy. And basically, the PCE price index increased 0.1 there. So this is where we are. And if we look at the historical, in August it was 0.2%, 0.4% here, the change, and current dollar disposable income at 0.4. It's been pretty much around that. Well, in August it was 0.1. So again, personal income expenditure at 1. It was in August at 0.1. So a little difference there. The PCE 0.4. That's pretty much where we are. The increase in personal income in September reflects increase in wages and salaries in non-farm proprietors' income. 76 billion increase in real PCE in September reflects an increase of 59.1 billion in spending for goods and 21.6 billion in spending for services. Within goods, new motor vehicles was the leading contributor to the increase. Within services, the largest contribution to increase was spending for household utilities. Very interesting there. Personal outlays increased at 132.5 billion in September. Personal savings was at 141.9 billion in September, and the personal savings rate, personal savings as a percentage of disposable income, was at 3.1%. So now we look at the charts a little bit here. Estimates updated for August and for July and August. It changes for preceding months for current dollar, personal income, current dollar chained to $2,009 these days. Revised and previously published are shown below for August and July. So look at some of these changes here. Well, for current dollar, 0.9%, 0.2% and 0.2% of disposable personal income, current dollars. This is in August at 0.1% there. So if you chain that in August, the revised, well, no, the same thing. A negative 0.1% has not changed at all. Thought it would. The August and September estimates of personal income and outlays reflect the effects of Harvey and Irma, but the BEA cannot separately qualify the total impact of the storms on personal income and outlays because most of the source data used to estimate the components of personal income and outlays do not separately identify the storm's impact. So this is basically where we are here. So we move down a bit here. Personal income and outlays released data. Oh, this is when they would release the data in 2018, January 29th, March 1st, March. That'll be the December to January issue there in 2018. And then the January 2018 to March 1st will be released there. So we really won't get much into when these releases are. But you sort of see where things are here in terms of disposable income. Let me just go back. Economists react to third quarter GDP report. This is from the Wall Street Journal. There's nothing to complain about. This is by Sharon News, I guess. NN. Anyway, the economy grew robustly in the third quarter despite two hurricanes. propelled by steady spending from American businesses and households. The gross domestic product expanded 3% in annual rate June through September. Here's what economists and analysts say about the report. Growth will be about 3% in the fourth quarter, as some people say. This means payroll growth will rebound strongly and unemployment rates will keep falling. A sub 4% rate is a matter of months away. Nothing drives a Fed policy like unemployment, which is why the market expects just one further hike. That will be in December meeting. After December, unrealistic. Anyway, it's our Shepardson of Papillon. Anyway, the good news: the economy keeps on keeping on and stroking off political uncertainty, hurricanes, etc. The bad news is the more pessimistic part of growth. Final sales to private domestic purchases grew at only 2.2%, and the advanced numbers are often revised. That's a very important question. To put out there, but really, there's nothing to complain about. That is from somebody else, Justin Wilson. There are some signs of weakness. Now, this is what we were talking about there. The structural investment falling by 5.2%, residential investment down by 6%, in state and local government expenditures contrasting at 9/10. Needlessly, most of that weakness is probably temporary. That's from Capital Economics, Paul Ashwood. And U.S. GDP details, we went over these, won't go over them again. The data on the past 2 quarters is strong, that in any political environment one would anticipate logic and timing of a major tax cut would face significant scrutiny. Given the gross inefficiencies of the tax code, tax reform has been needed for years, yet the tax cut that has been proposed, outside of a few, have been widely questioned. That is from Joseph Baselius of RSM. One important data point from the day's report is a key measure of inflation. That's the core price there. And we'll continue to actively decelerate growth at, 1.1% over 12 months compared to the last quarter of 1.2%. This will be below the preferred 2% target. That's the Fed rate. The signs strongly that the whole economy continues to slowly improve. There is no danger to rapid growth leading to overheating, and policymakers left the expansion to continue. That is Joe Blevins' Economy Policy Institute. In all, lovely isn't it? But it has to be a better positive GMP surprise than a negative. There's yet some concern about what's driving it and whether it represents a lasting uptick in demand or as opposed to just supply factors. It remains to be seen. That's from George Segan of the Cato Institute, whether the growth is sustainable. Now, that is a very, very big question out there, whether this is sustainable in a modern industrial capitalist society, a global economy, I should say, a setup. There are some signs that there are some weaknesses coming. The political instability of Washington. We won't go into the tax cut because this tax cutting plan, if it is even passed, it will take several months for it to get into the economy. You look at it from 3 to 6 months, and even 9 months down the road, and even a year down the road for these benefits. Now, depending on how they do it, if they make the tax cuts, say, for individuals retroactive, then there's some perhaps savings there. Will people take any additional refunds, however portrait they are, out and spend it in Q1 of 2018? That is a very big question. What corporations will do, no doubt they will bank the money. And will we see any expansions? Another big question. Let's go to the Reuters here. Now, this is a little bit of the U.S. House tangles with top tax issues. This is a Reuters. The bill timeline is in a self-imposed midweek deadline for unraveling a tax-cutting bill looms, and Republicans are still grappling with key issues, and lobbyists, of course, play a very big role. Asked by a reporter, this Kevin Brady, he's usually a questioner when Dr. Yellen was there before the Humphrey Hawkins committee. Our plan right now is the bill. He added that a number of issues still unresolved, very, very few. That's from him. But questions remain on tax deductions from business interest payments, state and local taxes, as well as proposals to change laws on retirement savings, that's the 401k, and business taxes. Now, their plan for up to $6 trillion in tax cuts for business individuals. This is over a decade, 10 years, but not only from Democrats, but rank and file Republicans. There's some challenges coming up here. One example is to keep the popular deduction for state and local taxes. Now, in states like New York, New Jersey, this is the SALT payments. Over the weekend, Brady said he would preserve deductibility of property taxes on a potential deal with lawmakers from high-tax states. Well, this is all up in the air. Analysts say the elimination of SALT deductions would disappropriately hit upper middle-class families in high-tax states. We're talking about New York, California, New Jersey, where many people in Jersey, many people in the markets work, the stock markets, that is. From Tim Reed, he's from New York. The discussions are too fluid, and a possible compromise to preserve the deduction for property taxes, but it ended for state and local taxes. Got to look at the numbers, and the numbers don't look good. Now, these are some other major elements, as we said in our introduction. The weekend National Association of Home Builders vowed to defeat the bill, saying it would double the standard deduction to $24,000 for married couples and sharply reduce, the number of middle-class homeowners claiming mortgage interest deductions. That is one of the largest deductions for many people of their homes, if they, if they are workers. This is just something also from Reuters here. I think we throw it in here. Asia is sluggish after Wall Street slips on dollars. This is the problems with the administration, and we'll get to this when we do the numbers. But data showing a sharper than expected slowdown in China's October factories growth also curbed regional investors there. Shanghai, well, we won't get into what they lost. 0.2%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng 0.35. Wall Street pulled back on from record territory on Monday, weighed down by Merck. Report that the U.S. lawmakers are discussing a gradual phase-in of corporate tax cuts rather than reducing them all at once. Now, this is kind of interesting there, but what form it is taking. What we now have is just a broad so-called blueprint, which means it's a throw it up in the air sort of thing. It doesn't mean much at all. The dollar is on a 10-day low at what? 113.2 yen. And this is back to when we came in here. Medford and his aide, a sidekick, Rich Gates, were charged with money laundering by that grand jury in Washington. The currency was also pressured by Treasury yields slipping on reports of DJ Trump likely appointing Jerome Powell, who is viewed as a more dovish than his contenders, and they're talking there about the Taylor rule. The 30-year Treasury bond yield fell to its lowest in weeks after Bloomberg quoted the Treasury Secretary Manchin in saying the government does not see a lot of demand for long-term bonds. Crude oil prices hold just below their recent peaks. We'll get into that in a minute, but basically these crude oil futures were down 0.5 tenths, running at $60.87 a barrel after rising to $61 overnight. That would be the highest since 2015. Not sustainable. U.S. crude oil, that was Brit crude, sorry about that. U.S. crude was down 0.2% at $54.05 after touching 54.46. Now let's roll on here. Consumer spending grows at the fastest pace since 2009. This is from Reuters. Households, however, dipped into savings to fund purchases last month, pushing savings to their lowest since the Depression of 2008, against a backdrop of lackluster wage growth and a drop in savings suggested that September's robust pace of consumer spending is unsustainable. We agree with this, that it's kind of interesting that people in September were dipping in, but I was talking to a lady the other day that had already done her holiday shopping. Kind of unusual in that as we enter in November, we'll have the discounts from the large retailers like the Amazon operation and various other retailers out there, that it would probably be somewhat cheaper to shop during that period. Now, some of the others, I think the Target Corporation, just have, quote unquote, this is a new buzzword I've noticed at the market, everyday low prices. Well, the problem is everyday low prices are not sales prices. Those are just regular prices, discount 2 or 3 pennies, maybe a nickel or something like that. So in other words, this is basically food. It's not getting cheaper, it's sustained, and then of course you have everyday prices, then you have what the current price is. So food is high and energy is high out there, higher, I should say, than what we normally encounter. If you recall, most of the year and last year, energy prices were low. Food prices fluctuated up, down, depending. I think there's a surplus of pork out there, and it's still there. And then there was a surplus of poultry. I don't know how the Turkey Day turkey will be this year, because all those things are processed and put in huge mammoth freezer operations and are frozen now unless you are buying it. So we're not certain how that will work. Anyway, the Department of Commerce said that consumer spending, which accounts for 2/3 of the economy, grew at 1% last month. We already talked about that. And prices last month unrevised at 0.2% in August. The increases, which include a boost from higher household spending on utilities. Now, we talked about this earlier. That is not good news at all. Economists had forecast consumer spending to increase at 0.8% in September. The data was included in the Friday third quarter gross domestic product report, which we gave here, showed consumer spending slowing to 2.4% amortized rate after a robust 3.3% in Q2. Now this is the moderation in consumption was offset by a rise in inventory investment, business spending on equipment, and a drop in imports. This is sort of repeating ourselves here, but this is the Reuters tech. We won't get into treasuries. We've already talked about that. Stocks were largely flat. Consumer spending in September was buoyed by purchases, and this is a normal course of events. Motor cars, they have the sales on for their 2018 models and getting ready to 2017. Probably as drivers in Texas and Florida replaced automobiles that were destroyed by Harvey and Irma, respectively. Spending on long-lasting goods like automobiles surged to 3.2% last month. Outlays on service rose 0.5%. Core inflation is not there. So-called core inflation, at 0.1% for 5 straight months. The core PCE at 1.3 in 12 months has on the shot. The Fed's magic rate is at 2%. So again, that is as policymakers believe that low inflation readings are a result of territorial factors like the one-off reduction in the cost of mobile phone service, and expect pricing pressures to rise as the labor market tightens. Others, however, worry that the factors behind tame inflation could be more persistent. That's talking about deflation. Deflation is a very hard item to deal with. Japan, it took them 10 years to deal with it, and you're seeing some of that out there, because what happens that you have now, you have the consumer demand increased, but at the same time using savings, it's not sustainable, and then these so-called everyday low prices are going to need to be lower, or they're going to be on the shelves. It's that simple, a non-economic way of telling it, but that is what's happened. And the savings rate here fell at $441.9 billion in September, the lowest since the Depression of 2008, from $521.4 billion in August. Now, these are some things you look at very, very carefully here. And personal income increased rose 0.4% last month, after increasing 0.2%. Not 2%. The low savings rate is expected to be a large constraint on consumer spending in the months ahead, and could lead to a higher delinquency rate. Now, yes, you could have with credit cards and what have you for some categories. This is from Reuters here. Consumer spending, if real income growth continues to lag. That's from Scott Anderson, the chief economist at the Bank of the West in San Francisco. So this is something, we look at and don't take. Okay. Now let's go back to our BBC part of this. Banks prepare for Brexit job losses. This is in the BBC part here. And we'll take a look at it as we start to round things out a bit here. The Bank of England believes Brexit will cost 75,000 financial jobs. The Bank of England, 75,000. The number could change depending on the UK's post-Brexit trading relationship with the EU. The bank still expects a substantial job loss. Many jobs will move to the continent. The Bank of England asked banks and other financial institutions, such as hedge funds, to provide with contingency plans. The EU could also impose location-specific regulations, such as where trading in trillions of pounds worth of EU-denominated financial insurance product could be based. A poll of 100 financial firms by Reuters suggests that the number of jobs lost would be below 10,000 in the few years following Brexit. I understand banks believe 10,000 jobs figure is likely on day one of Brexit, no doubt. And the bank believes that it is too high in a scenario over the next 3 to 5 years, closer to the 2010 study by Oliver Wyman, a management consultant. Anyway, reports suggest that between 65,000 and 75,000 job losses. Now, these are very good jobs there. Goldman is thinking of moving to Frankfurt, that's in Germany. And the report also argues that there will be opportunities from Brexit, such as developing financial services from emerging markets across the Mideast, Asia, including China and India. Well, that is an idea, but at the same time, a lot of the emerging market business will no doubt be in China, period. Business bodies, again, call for clarity. This is what happens. This Brexit idea was a nativist movement, they call it, to rid the UK of so-called foreign influence. An unfortunate situation, but that happens. J.P. Morgan said it might have to move 4,000 jobs, but since the referendum cut that number to 1,000. The Swiss bank UBS said it may move as few as 250 jobs. But again, these are only estimates. This is not something that we can count upon with certainty, period. And let me see what else here. USBCs, their profits have grown there. We'll grab this one. This is UK not ready for fourth industrial revolution. The report says, I guess they're talking about robotics. Independent review, chaired by the head of Siemens, UK, highlighted the benefits of robotics, 3D printing, and artificial intelligence. Mr. Mela said the UK needs greater ambition to take advantage of such technology. He said a huge number of workers would need to be retrained. He called a commission for better business adjustment to training technologies. The report makes Smarter brought together executives from companies such as Rolls-Royce, IBM, GKN, etc. A recommendation will help with the government in their planning. Professor Mia told the BBC's Programm the transition would mean job losses. On one hand, it would to create productivity and more exports there. And this is the reason we were doing this. This will happen in the U.S. economy also. More targeted support for companies reskilling workers, a national adoption program piloted in the Northwest. 5 digital research centers to improve innovation and capacity. This is happening right now in China and some more of the so-called emerging industrial capitalist countries. And they're trying to get some more in the U.S. And robotics has been around a long time. I can remember in the 80s we used to talk about, I think in Japan, a robot actually killed somebody. But anyway, very primitive robot. But They have been in the automobile industry, the steel industry for some time, but they are getting to be much more swift. The UK must compete with China, the US, and much of Europe. And from the software company Vertenzer, and a contributor to the report, the UK needs to catch up with the international competition. Well, this is one of the reasons also that the UK has got a lot of problems to solve, and Brexit did not help the UK, period. There was an old article we had here, and this is just the U.S. economy grew faster than they assumed that it would. Now, this is just looking at it. They have a little chart, and we'll try to put this up. Quarter over quarter, what happened with G.W. Bush and the growth there, and in his second term, obviously, it went completely south. And then President Obama in the first term, and it went up and up and up, and around 3%. And under Trump, you got the 3%, but that is a little has made hitting around 3% a goal, and pledged the tax cuts, etc. On year-over-year basis, GNP was up 2.3%. Very, very difficult to maintain. Now, this is from Ken Rogoff. It's a professor at Harvard. We've talked about some of his work here before. It said growth reflects improvement in the labor market and other areas dating back to the Obama administration. Make no mistake, these are very good numbers. Jobs have been improving. Consumption has improved. Businesses are doing better. There is a profound inequality problem but the U.S. economy, despite not much from Trump, is doing very well. Well, that is true, but job growth on some sectors have been more limited, particularly for people 55 and older, and for people of color, i.e., African Americans, Latinos, ex-Asians, etc. So there are still some problems out there. And one of the things we'll look at more and more as we were just getting our program on the Seattle mayoral election, one of the places we're covering on Bostonred on WBRN radio. Nonetheless, they're talking about growth there and what had happened to Seattle. I used to live in Seattle. With all the influx of the tech workers, not so much to Microsoft anymore, they've been there for a while, but of the Amazons and some of those where they've got roughly 100,000 more workers in there. And I think what they were saying, the median price for a home there now is $800,000. So one of the candidates was reprimanded, or what do you want to call it, for living in a 1.5 penthouse in downtown Seattle. Well, 800 plus 880, almost 900,000 is, if that's the medium house there, is she's just living in a little above an average home. And then what that does to an economy in terms of equity and fairness is terrible. Anyway, nonetheless, let's move on here to the markets. This is on a Monday, if otherwise noted. The BBC Global 30 at 4.008, and that is a plus 4/10. The FTSE All Share on Monday is down 5.21 here, and let's move on. In Amsterdam, 0.02. In Frankfurt, the DAC at 12.03. In Paris, a negative 0.50. In Brussels, a negative 13.48. In Zurich, a negative 7.92. In Moscow, 2.53 in the positive. In Johannesburg on Friday, a negative 294.82. In Bombay on Tuesday, we are on Tuesday actually now, a negative 78.49. On Monday in Karachi, a negative 78.08. In Lahore, a negative 45.11. In Colombo, and that was Lahore was on Friday. In Colombo, Monday, a negative 5.77. In Tehran on Monday, 60.60 in the positive. In Sydney on Tuesday, a negative 7.30. The Nikkei on a Monday, 3.22 in the positive. The Hang Seng in Hong Kong on Tuesday, a negative 66.82. In Shanghai on Monday, 26.48 in the negative. In New York on Monday, a negative 85.45. The Nasdaq a negative 2.30. The Merck, that is a commodities market out in the Midwest city of Chicago, a negative 8.24. In San Pablo on Monday, negative 1,046.17. In Mexico on Friday, a negative 648.42. On to the commodities. Brent crude, Monday. Let me just make sure we got this right. Sure, the latest figures are here. Okay, on Monday, 44 cents. It was up 44 cents at $60.57. The Brent crude spot market was up $1.14 at $58.59. West Texas crude was up 25 cents at $54.15. T-Boone pickers jumping for joy. You remember $15 a barrel oil, which I suppose in $70 is fairly close now. Nonetheless, gold, the Forex here, gold, it was up $5.55 on Monday. We'll do the other one here. Forex, at $1,272. And Dubai Gold futures were up $3.80 at $1,277.40. Silver, for those that are in that, is up 2 cents at $16.74. Well, it's up, so I suppose you could stay with it. Euronext life futures. I'm not sure why we like to do this, but we do. Cocoa was down $2. Let me see what else. Corn futures are down $1.50. Feed wheat futures were up 40 cents. And Robusta coffee was down, finally, $38. White sugar futures were up $2. The Bloomberg Commodity Index, this is from Wednesday, at 85.59, $85.59. And that is it. That was Wednesday afternoon. This will do it for us. For those in business, keep your eye on the prize. For the consumer, keep your eye on the prize. For those in business, make this week. Sorry about that. We usually do this on the weekends. A productive one. There are a lot of machinations going on out there, and you need to look at a number of sources and take them as euphemistically say, a grain of salt. Now, we're going into the holiday season. We'll see how the major retailers do it. And some are going with the everyday low prices. That is, I think, Target's strategy. They will have some but perhaps not enough. They had a dismal holiday season last year. And what Walmart will do will be very interesting. They have already stated that they will not hire additional workers for the holiday situation. Evidently, Amazon probably will. But this is interesting how the de-emphasis on, since I was a child a long time ago, they always hire workers for the holiday season. We should call it the Christmas season those days, but anyway, we'll modernize that since we're speaking to the rest of the world here. So those are some of the things that happened, and what will go in China. We'll be interested in that. We stay very close to China and the holiday season, the New Year, etc., coming up there. So everybody has a holiday. Whether or not you're buying something for next year or you're buying winter clothes, the winter has started to set in, so perhaps winter clothes will, the cost will come up. But a lot of merchants now literally have started already running this holiday season game in September. So that basically means that the consumers were dipping into their savings, are running their credit cards in September and in October, which, well, things are not as rosy as they should be. As you go into December, depending on what they have done, and if the retailers are saying, well, we'll have some discounts, but there'll be everyday low price. In other words, the everyday low price would be basically the same thing they had in August and September. So that means the retail community is not budging. But does it also mean that they are de-emphasizing the holiday selling period? What will Amazon do in terms of selling? What their special promotions, so-called Black Friday. Then we have the net day sales, what have you there. Or will it go back from online to a lot of local type bargains there, or at least a local shopping? Those are some of the things we'll drill down into. Now, that's not really, that is more microeconomics than macro. But there's more blurs between the two now, especially when we look at the influence of the market, particularly commodities, and more so to what central banks are doing. Example, in the UK, what this basic thing is doing there. The UK is trying to get to the emerging markets. They call them in China and India. When China and India have other ideas, they want to get the business done also. And then you have the big EU out there. The EU is doing okay as a combined situation there. Here in the U.S., we'll be watching, obviously, what the U.S. economy does, and at the same time how Mexico fares in this new territory, and also in Canada. We haven't had anything from Canada. We'll look at those also. This will do it for us. Have a good week, everyone, from WBRN Radio in Boston. And on the Bostonred Network. Incidentally, we're on YouTube. We're on Spreaker. We're on iHeartRadio. We are all over the place. You can find us on the RSS feed for the old timers. A lot of people subscribe to that. We invite you to subscribe to that. Our Twitter feed at Economics 2010. You'll see our symbol there. And we are moving on to the Google outlet there, Google Play or whatever it is called, Android operation. We should have been there, but anyway, we'll get there. And we'll open up some more platforms, particularly looking at Australia and at China, these developing economies out there. And from Australia, we get the gateway to the rest of Asia.